we have of Dr. Mehmet, if you're here, is how can Islamic moral and political economy help us reach back balance to see zakat is returning to the right of society to society, and what values or principles do you think we need to recenter? Over to yourself.
Okay, assalamu alaikum to everyone, and it's good to be here, and it's good to see all the colleagues from different institutions, but in particular Dr. Hani, as I know him from my student years from the Islamic Society activism, but also I have been engaging with Sister Fatima and Tina. Now my take up on zakat, but what is called Islamic social finance, is a political economy perspective in terms of resource accessibility. And that resource accessibility is particularly important for us to understand within the larger context rather than the charitable giving. It's a structural issue, how we structure the society in terms of resource accessibility. Unfortunately, this term that has come out in recent years called Islamic social finance is terribly undermining the whole concept of zakat and also waqf, although our focus is zakat, because it financializes, it takes out from the religious context, the political economic context, and it limits within the neoliberal condition of moving capital part. And that is totally unjust. And it is pity that that term Islamic social finance has become now a common terminology that we use. And I totally oppose that, because this is a resource accessibility issue. And it is a political economy issue, how we organize the society around resources. The whole premises, therefore, of Islamic moral and political economy lies into how a social formation of a society is organized. In other words, how people's accessibility to resources, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for everyone to have access. And within that access process, from the initial position of entirely liberated position, over the centuries, of course, with the emergence of territoriality and emergence of establishing territories, whether it's a empire state, individual territorialities, what we have resulted in is people claiming rights on resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for everyone to have access. And where we are now today, the resources are entirely dominated by corporations, and therefore resource accessibility have become terribly difficult. And the role associated to Muslims, and in particular zakat and Islamic social welfare institutions, to moderate the consequences of neoliberal condition. So we are not allowed to ask the question why we have this structural problem of inequality in resource accessibility, but on the contrary, we are asked to use our resources. In now, of course, the international agencies are tapping into as well, to moderate the consequences of the existing structure without questioning the structure. However, the Islamic position here and Islamic moral economy position here is very much how we can create the necessary structures within the Islamic understanding, that social formation, that Allah, individual self, space and time, social relations, and the resource accessibility. So that is an important structure within Islamic institutional logic to organize that resource accessibility. Allah, creator of all those resources, I, as an individual, has certain accessibilities, but within the time and the space, I am not allowed to establish this territorial hegemonic position, and therefore with the social relations that I exist in a society, how I can ensure resource accessibility can be possible. What I term this one as ihsani governance. In other words, beyond the fiqhi position, even beyond the legalistic position, the moral condition is that how I can ensure ensure with the resource accessibilities that I have, how other people that I can allow them to have access to those resources. And that's very much the Islamic moral condition. And Islamic moral economic, political economic condition, therefore, to overcome how in the short run we can overcome the barriers, how we can overcome the barriers, and in the long run, how we can break those barriers so that the structural change can happen in the society, so that the empowerment position can take place. And that is particularly important when we look at the Quranic verse directly refers to the prohibition of riba and the zakat together. And this directly relates to this injunction directly relates to capital. One, riba prohibition suggests that the power of capital has to be relegated so that this hegemonic power of capital has to be eliminated so that the balance can be maintained in the society. And on the other hand, the zakat condition immediately emerge again because the accessibility of resources are overcome because of the territoriality, because of the privatization of resources. Again, how capital, the position of capital is relegated through giving the compensation to the society because resources belongs to society, and hence establishing that balance. The power of capital through riba relegated, and then compensation because of the privatization, again, the position of capital. And therefore, this is a society of mīzān, the way, what we call one of the meaning of ihsan is the equilibrium. The way Allah created the society with these equal excesses, how we can ensure that we are approaching towards that, and hence the ihsani position. And therefore, the whole conceptualization of Islamic institutional logic here, directly referring to us, looking at the Islamic institutional logic and locating zakat within that understanding of balance. Therefore, the justice, the ʿadl, why? Because the tawhidi condition, Islamic moral economy's position directly starts, as I mentioned, Allah, that's a tawhid, and tawhid directly suggests the complementarity is, and therefore unity. Complementarity is that everything and everyone complements each other, and therefore the mīzān condition, and therefore we have to seek justice to ensure that all stakeholders have access to resources, and through which then we can sustain the equilibrium, the ihsani condition, and how individual responsibility to Khalifa, and end in the end the falah condition. And therefore just relegating zakat, just a charitable instrument rather than a political economy instrument to restructure society, is unfortunately taking this amazing instrument out of its context and relegating only a relief-oriented instrument. The condition of zakat directly establishing peace in the society, accessibility to resources, ensuring that the equilibrium can be sustained. In other words, yes, we have to give zakat, not because it's a charity, but directly because it is the expropriation of land, water, resources, and etc. And therefore, society has to be compensated, those people who are excluded from that. Similarly, the prohibition of riba directly relates to using capital power to punish others and expropriating again.
Thank you, Dr. Mehmet.
Expropriation is at the heart of this. And therefore, just to finish with, therefore, rather than allowing zakat, this amazing instrument, to be utilized just out of the context, directly, rather than directly empowering individuals, but just a charitable instrument, but also, unfortunately, in recent years, how, as Dr. Hani Albana mentioned, how governments have become clever to collect the zakat to overcome the budget deficits. These are unfortunately undermining the power of civil society. Zakat has to be on the civil society to negotiate against the power of the states, so that their political economic structure response can be developed for the rest of the society, so that the empowerment can take place and emancipation from need can be essentialized. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.